Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world, from border to border, coast to coast, and to all the ships at sea. I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning into the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare, technology, and culture. I am extremely pleased today. My guest is Rachel Dunscombe, who is the CEO of HL7. Founded in 1987, Health Level 7 International, or HL7, is a not-for-profit, ANSI-accredited standards development organization dedicated to empowering the interoperability of healthcare data globally. Anybody who's in this space knows that HL7 is the mothership. So really glad to have Rachel here. Rachel, welcome to the Tate Chronicles.
Thank you, Jim. It's so good to be with you today.
I don't think we need to go into too much detail about why interoperability is important. But I know
it's important.
It is important. I know we'll touch on that. But first, let me ask you, one concern is that for many health systems, whether they are smaller or maybe under-resourced for whatever reasons, struggle with the cost and complexity of interoperability compliance. What is HL7 doing to lower that barrier rather than widening that gap between well-funded and under-resourced organizations? We want a big tent. We want a big tent here, Rachel.
I understand. And particularly for rural healthcare, this is a big lift. So one thing that we're really doing is ramping up education and accessible education, because we need far more educated people who understand all of the healthcare standards, including, HL7 family and fire. Just been off a call today where we're working on some joint guidance for the future with SNOMED to make it easier to implement. Our aim is to make this real world implementable, with the minimum lift. And I think we've really gone from setting the standards to now being in the phase of mass deployment of standards. And our job increasingly is to make it for people like you and I that have been in health systems before, easy to implement and reducing that friction. So, I've been in around about 5 months now in HL7. And a lot of that focus is, once we're normative with fire R6, we put resource into making this a standard that everyone can, understand as easily as possible.
I know you've been on both sides of this, probably all sides of the question of interoperability. And I bet you've seen the downside when people can't access records, when providers can't, when there is no interoperability. So it really is a life or death situation in many instances.
Oh, I've been there myself, where I had the paper notes of my dad when he had a stroke, and that saved his life. And the records weren't available. I've been there personally. And for me, that's why I'm here, actually, because I was involved in Data Saves Lives, which was a movement in the UK that counted the lives saved and improved. It really, Jim, I think for the next generation health system, the infrastructure is going to be the data and the interoperability. It's going to make care available where it needs to be available. It's going to provide services where we should be providing them. I see it as the future infrastructure, as important as the hospital walls, right? The facility walls.
One thing I'm always curious about, Rachel, in England, you have a National Health Service.
Yeah, we do.
Is there one EHR that is used? Do you have built-in? Oh, no.
Oh, no.
God. Tell me about that.
No.
Tell me.
So you think there's one health service. It's actually what are called foundation trusts that are semi-autonomous organizations, which each choose their own EMR. So we've probably got at least as many EMRs as the US has got, including the US EMRs. So, the Epics, the Oracles, the Harris, Sunrise, Meditech, plus a number that are just in the UK market and a couple of European ones as well. So it is just as much of a patchwork quilt as it is in the US, if not more, because I think we don't deploy them at the same scale that you do. So I've been there, and I've had to deal with that interoperability piece between different systems. I looked after the interoperability across city region, for a while and getting an integrated record, I know how much pain this causes. It's a really difficult problem because the research shows that between different EMRs, the actual true interoperability is around about, I think, 22 to 23%. And it's really hard. You're not getting the richness of the data that you would hope through to the record. So yes, the UK has got similar challenges to the US.
And so that's one reason I want to talk to you today, Rachel, because HL7 has a global reach. So what happens in one area is much different than what happens in another area, whether it's the culture or the regulation or the government mandates. So how is HL7 able to be, trying to think of the right word, of importance no matter what country we're dealing with? How's that global, I guess, a denominator?
I think it's a global denominator. So there are several things here. One, human biology is human biology across the planet. And when we're talking about somebody's healthcare record, it is the same things that we need to measure across the globe. So certainly for the bits of this that are the clinical record, it's absolutely, the same things that we need to look at. You just need to look at things like the International Patient Summary. That is where we're looking at allowing citizens of the world to travel with their record. The reason being, your blood pressure in one country is the same as your blood pressure in another country, or your HbA1c in one country is the same as it is in another. Where we have the localizations in, other countries, we have affiliates, which actually help with those localizations. And systems are different. Some of them are public systems, some of them private systems or mixes. And so they really deal with what is needed within the country. Things like, are you just accounting for activity? Do you have, payers and providers? Do you have different things that may be measured that are important in some geographies, like, infectious diseases or genetic diseases? So really, we have these affiliates. We've got around about 42 of them now across the globe that help with that localization piece and actually assist. But really, the core of it is incredibly similar, and many countries use the same systems. And I see us becoming more of a global market in that sense. Many of us use the US EMRs. Many of us, are sharing systems now. It's less of a local marketplace. So for me, the standards are incredibly important. We need, that base standard, which we have at HL7, which is the commonality. And then we need the localizations, as you see with the US core or UK core or, other countries' core.
Interoperability is a stool, I guess, or a chair with at least 3 legs I can think of off the top of my head.
I like that.
So the primary leg is the work HL7 is doing, which is setting standards. And then there's a technical piece, I guess, the plumbing, for lack of a better word, the connections. But then there's the thing of culture that providers with 30 or 40 years experience who have not been exposed to interoperability, they have to have buy-in in some way to see the benefits.
Yeah.
And so do you think the cultural aspect, the adoption aspect, or is it, I'll give you an example. I used to do EHR implementations. And so trying to talk people into using their EHR was a little difficult. But once they could see that they could do electronic prescriptions, they immediately thought, I want this. So, could you speak to that a little bit about maybe some early big wins that convince people I'm going to change my workflows or the way I practice?
Absolutely. And I think there's cultural changes in the boardroom of organizations, hospital groups, facilities, and there's a cultural change at the sort of operational level. And in the boardroom, I think people, they could be worried about losing patients out network or whatever else, or, what this means for them. I think now is the time in the boardroom, they absolutely need to be looking at the age we're in, the age of, data for every sector, and really yes, there may be a risk that you lose patients out of network, but the opportunity is far greater. The opportunity is to provide, better services more cost effectively to a larger group and to bring patients into your network because you are modern, digital, enabled. And so really reimagining the business model of healthcare is something that really needs to be done. But then when you do get down to the sort of operational level, I'm sure that you found, Jim, in the old days when we implemented, EMRs, we didn't really give people their data back to see, work on, or, use. I think we're improving that. But for me, it's really, for clinicians, it's seeing the impact. That's why we did things like data save slides in the UK to prove to people it was worth doing this and putting this effort in. Yeah. So giving people the data when they need it for care, but also giving them data to work on so that they can improve their clinical practice or their service or, do quality improvement. I think those things are really important. And if you do interoperability well, you look at all of the opportunities it will bring you and you play to those opportunities. But you can't kind of half do interoperability. If you half do interoperability, you just implement it to check a box, but don't get all the benefits because you've not thought it through. So for me, this is almost an industrial revolution in healthcare where we've gone from paper to data being available everywhere. And unless you embrace what that means, you're not going to get the benefit. And it's really hard, I know, for people to make the space to think this through. But technology is moving so fast that unless you choose to embrace it and leverage it, you really will in a number of years have fallen behind. So it's what everyone, I think, needs to do. And I would really encourage people to get curious. Curiosity is the biggest sort of attribute of people that do this well. They go and learn more. They go and try things themselves. They go and ask, other people in other systems what they're doing. And the people that are curious, I think, are the ones that are most successful.
Let me say to those listeners who just have joined us, I'm Jim Tate. And on this episode of the Tate Chronicles, I'm speaking with Rachel Dunscombe, CEO of none other than HL7. Sometimes, especially in healthcare information systems, providers need a little bit of a nudge. And so here in the U.S., we had the meaningful use programs, which essentially bought EMRs for every hospital and every provider in the country. And then organizations were set up and were paid to teach providers how to use EMRs. There really isn't anything like that for interoperability. There's a little bit, there's a program scheme called Promoting Interoperability. And part of that may be access to the TEFCA network here in the U.S.
Yes.
But certainly the push, there's no significant financial stimulation that there was just to adopt the EMRs. So, that tipping point, I'm older than you, but I can remember when the first computer word processors came into the market, and almost in 1 year, everybody threw away their typewriter. It was such an obvious advantage. And so it's going to be fascinating to see the adoption rate for interoperability. So, and I guess where I'm going with this is that you've worked across global health systems. You're in the UK, you worked in the US. What are some, for our listeners in the US, what are some interoperability lessons from outside the US that people here may get wrong or underestimate?
So that's a really interesting one because, well, one thing for me, a very simple one, if you're going to interoperate, you need to know the identity of your citizen. And that's one thing that you definitely need a national strategy and or policy for, because you cannot join up data unless you know who your patient or person is, right? So that's one big lesson then. And one thing that I felt very grateful for in the UK was our spine that did that. There are other countries that have done really good jobs. some countries, are really struggling at the moment. And you've got ID.me and other things, but actually pushing on that in the US, I think is a really wise move. The second thing is that you do need some policy or incentives to push this along, because what you really want to do is make a market where interoperability is both a sort of something aspirational that everyone wants and needs, but also something that every tech company needs to embrace and adopt correctly. And that can need rules and legislation. It can need, as you talk through, a similar path to TECA and other things. From my side, it's really interesting. I was involved in some of the legislation in my policy work in the UK. We got it into, Parliament, and that was enshrining that people would adhere to standards. And it's not just about that legislation. It's also about how you deal with, compliance for that legislation, how you actually indicate to the buyers and the market who, is complying and who isn't complying. The US will take its own path through this. It's got its wonderful free market, both of healthcare and systems, but there is a role of government. And I think, the ONC and CMS are doing some fantastic things and have fantastic plans about how we move forward. I think what's really interesting is how that signal comes back from how successful interoperability is being deployed on the ground in health systems. And I think that, that is really an important indicator to any policymaker of what they need to do next and how they need to move forward. One thing it really is, you talked about your stool with the different, there's also a culture. And I think, again, CMS and the ONC are supporting a great culture of interoperability. They're supporting initiatives that, supporting communities. They're getting involved in our accelerators. So for me, there are great attributes, but I think any government, and that's the US government included, needs to remain agile about the policy and rule creation to stimulate the right market, especially in the world of AI, because we've got to be reactive to both the opportunities that AI are presenting constantly to us, but also any risks that there may be around healthcare and any sort of red lines that need to be put in place.
One thing I've been thinking about a lot recently, Rachel, in regards to HL7 and really interoperability, is that there's such an explosion now of patient-generated data, wearable devices, all these real-world data streams, the whole concept of a hospital bed in the home, all that kind of stuff. Does HL7's current architecture, can it accommodate that volume variety, or does something structural need to change on your side?
No, it can accommodate it. And we have a brand new accelerator called Caliper that is doing this work, led by Todd Cooper. Absolutely fantastic. I spent, good bit of time with him last week talking about it, because part of my background has actually been working with wearables and, consumer wearables as well as medical devices. So I've done work and been frustrated myself in the past. And we've now, this is absolutely fantastic. Kudos to everyone involved. We've embraced this, and we're taking our standards, which can work with this data, but actually working with the vendor marketplace, policymakers, a whole ecosystem of people to create implementation guidance and other things for everything from, those devices next to the bed in ICU through to your wearable device on your wrist. So the aim here is to create an ecosystem where, as a citizen, you can aggregate your data, or in, the hospital, that can be aggregated into your medical record. So it's going to be a number of years journey, because there are so many devices and so many manufacturers and everything out there, but everyone's welcome to join in the Caliper Accelerator. And we've got some really big ambitious plans. It's personal passion of mine to bring this data together, because it's so useful to both healthcare professionals as well as the citizen themselves.
Well, that's a good segue into my next question. Was from the standpoint of HL7, what does success look like 5 years from now?
That's a really good point. So looking in 5 years, the first thing really is that we need to be supporting deployment in all of the use cases across the globe,
Yeah.
So making these standards as low friction as possible to deploy and having those implementation guides out there that support people in deploying. But success really, for me, looks like benefit being generated by healthcare systems.
Mm-hmm.
And recently I've collaborated with the OECD on a report of the benefits of interoperability. It's due out really shortly, in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And it's an incredibly compelling report that talk about, the billions of pounds that can be saved and the sort of benefits of interoperability. The billions of dollars that you will save in the US, billions of US dollars, Australian dollars, euros. And it quantifies it based on a number of country studies where they've worked on the data. And I actually worked on the UK study, that was done to look at the amount of savings, For me, 5-year success looks like people realizing those benefits. Yeah. So they're actually seeing the benefits of interoperability. And, that is a proven path that, if you like, is something that, becomes absolute essential architecture and infrastructure for the future that has benefits attached to it.
So here's a question to ask everybody, and I'm going to ask you this also, Rachel. In the arc and trajectory of interoperability, I first experienced it maybe in the early 1980s when the first fax machine was dragged into a doctor's office I worked at. And we thought that was pretty miraculous. That was stage one. Yeah, at least you got some data. I guess one thing is we can define what the end goal is, but then also where are we in that arc?
That's interesting. You're starting with fax machines, and I still remember fax machines as well.
Yeah.
They were really useful.
Yes, they were.
They were really. I remember referrals coming off the fax machines. Where are we on that trajectory? That's a really interesting one, because if we were just interoperating the healthcare systems as we are today, I would say, we're definitely over halfway. But actually, with AI and generative AI, that's added a whole different sort of dimension to this, yeah? Because we're going to be iterating, and with the wearable devices and the new tech that's coming out, and edge AI on those devices as well. I think there's a whole journey to unfold, which is, near never ending, because we are going to keep iterating that tech. But I think we've got this horizon of the, if you like, human-to-human interoperability, which is kind of the fax machine comparison. I think we're probably over halfway through that journey now. But then when you add the layer of AI, which is adding value to that, I think that is a never-ending kind of iteration. It's not a single program. It's going to be something where we need to continue to iterate ongoing as technology emerges. And we're doing some work at the moment on making fire readable and digestible and understanding the provenance of data for AI. So I'm making it, more useful to AI, and we're continuing to listen to what is needed for that. But I see, that the standards themselves will also need to grow to encompass new types of data, because we're going to be recording more, we're going to have more types of sensors. And so the standards are going to need to keep in line with that. So the human-to-human interoperability, I can see a pathway in a number of years where we can have achieved that. But really, I think this next horizon now is how the machine augments humans and adds value to what they're doing. That is really exciting. I don't think any of us can call how that's going to play out. So for me, it's exciting taking the journey, but I'm sure we'll have some reflections in the next few years around where we're going. At this point, for me, all I know is it's going to be exciting. We're going to learn a lot of things, and we've also got to embrace that journey.
I'm glad you brought up AI, because the development and scale of AI is so rapid. I can remember 6 months ago thinking, well, in 2 or 3 years, coders are going to have to worry about their careers. Actually, it only took 2 or 3 months.
Oh, yeah.
And so here in this country, Anthropic, released their latest AI model, and immediately the federal government said you cannot release that basically to anybody.
Yes. Yes.
So who knows where that's going to take us? It's fascinating.
It's fascinating, and we've got other countries talking about sovereign large language models or foundational models. This could play out so many different ways. Are we going to get, a geographical split? Are we going to get, an industry split? What are we going to get? So for me, geopolitics plays a huge amount. We can't call that right. That's playing a huge amount of a role. All we know HL7 is we need to make the data available to whoever needs it at the right place with the right consent. And we are an enabler to all of the good things that need to happen, but we just don't know how that's going to play out, right? This has never been more uncertain, I don't think, but more exciting at the same time.
And potential there. Rachel, we're almost totally out of time, but before we say goodbye to our listeners, how can they find out more about the mission and goals of HL7? Where do they go?
Okay, HL7.org is our website. Please do look on there, but we would really welcome anyone that wants to join the community to come and join us. This is, for me, probably the most exciting career that people can be in. Saving lives, improving lives with data and interoperability, being part of the really exciting projects with our accelerators as well, which you'll find more details on our website about. So if anyone's interested, please look at that. Or if you want to actually get me on X, I'm on @UK Penguin.
Well, to our audience, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. And I, of course, offer a special salute. My guest today, Rachel Dunscombe, CEO of HL7. Rachel, thanks for coming aboard today.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. That's healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbor.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.